What do all of the following have in common? Elena Ferrante's Neapolitan novels, Toni Morrison's Sula, Girls, Girlfriends, 13, Ghost World, Daria, Hey Arnold, and Insecure? All this media has storylines that explore and acknowledge something many women know to be true about the nature of close female friendships. There's sometimes inherent antagonism, competition, and an undercurrent of constant recalibration and reconciliation that belies the tenderness and fairness that women have to present outwardly and constantly to the world. The bad friend in these fictional dynamics must therefore be the main character. If she were relegated to a side character, she'd be reduced to an outright antagonist, maybe even a villain. But when the story centers her, when we follow her thoughts and rationalizations, we're forced to contend with the discomfort of her flaws and interrogate our own in relation to our friend groups. Through these characters, whether they're likable or not, we're presented with the option of who we sympathize with, and the fervor at which we use to defend these fictional characters allows us to safely vent our frustrations through reflecting on why they make us so mad, sad, happy in the first place. A quick aside. I believe that we are due to re-examine how bad a friend Issa D was to Molly. In the same way, we had to have enough space and time to explore how truly, I'm trying to think of an adjective, Carrie Bradshaw was. Speaking of Carrie Bradshaw, Sex and the City is often hailed as a show about female friendship, sexual liberation, and big city living, and it's all of those things. But we don't have to dig very deep to realize that the statements the show makes aren't meant to be instructional, even as we get a quippy ending and voiceover monologue that is supposed to offer some narrative closure. The show does an especially good job of exploring all of these facets through the complicated relationship between Carrie Bradshaw and Charlotte York. Unlike the other intersections and friendship combinations with the other four women, their dynamic goes beyond what I would call an ideal or desirable model of a healthy friendship. Theirs is a series of subtle underlying tensions that ebb over time. Their relationship, in my humblest opinion, has earned its place in the contentious fictional friendships pantheon, a true and even archetypal exemplar of how long a dysfunctional friendship can last if at least one person needs it to, no matter the selfish motivation. To call Carrie and Charlotte two sides of the same coin doesn't feel quite right to me. I have a very clear, obvious favorite, or rather, I recognize who the better and more attentive friend is in the relationship. A better metaphor might be oil and vinegar, where Charlotte is the oil, more stable and useful, generally gets along better with more ingredients, so to speak, even a necessary ingredient to bringing things together, handles heat well. Carrie is vinegar. Harder to work with, doesn't take heat well, stable in that it can't change any much more, derivative of several other steps before it, but also sharper and adds a necessary zing and depth. You miss the acidity if it's supposed to be there and it's not. It's incomplete. She's a more difficult ingredient, but that's why she's the center of the show, and why her friendship with Charlotte, more than any other in the series, reveals something uncomfortable about the complexities of how we treat ourselves through our female friendships. The expression of the oil and the vinegar homegirl dynamic is typified by the properties of each solution. They never actually mix, no matter how much you shake them together, and they remain distinct. They can be entangled and suspended in each other's orbit for a moment, battling for space, but they'll always separate again unless something, an intermediary, forces them to fully combine. For Carrie and Charlotte, the best intermediaries are their shared friendship with Miranda and Samantha. With all four of them, this dynamic, a separate but togetherness, isn't an issue. But occasionally, and especially, the intermediary can reveal a critical weak point and insecurity that highlights the worst in one or more people in the relationship. The toxic intermediary that brings out the worst Carrie, that highlights her true ascetic nature, is generally big, but the example we'll discuss in this video is something a little more universal than a bad boyfriend. Like so many people, I found myself rewatching and enjoying SATC on streaming. While there are some moments that make me recoil or gag, and several episodes I have to skip completely, I'm surprised by how well it's held up overall, all things considered. One episode that I sit through and have remained pretty consistent on how I feel is that episode. You know the one. Season 4, episode 16, Ring-a-Ding-Ding, aka the money episode. It's about money on the surface, but beneath that, it's about resentment, jealousy, and trying to reestablish a sense of order, power, and hierarchy. The toxic intermediary here is the money that Carrie needs to buy her apartment. If you recall, Carrie gets the opportunity to buy her apartment back from Aiden, the man she was engaged to. Aiden offers to sell it to her for the price he paid for it, and Carrie needs to secure a down payment or she has to vacate her apartment. During brunch, she lets the group know what's going on, and this exchange occurs.
You got yours in the settlement. You did not have to pay for your apartment.
Oh, I paid for that apartment.
Carrie goes to the bank and gets declined because of course she does. On a shoe shopping excursion, we find out that while not in liquid cash, Carrie has had access to the amount that she would need for a down payment in the form of shoes.
I spent $40,000 on shoes and I have no place to live?
My first interjection, and this is not related to Carrie and Charlotte. I think the reason that this episode makes so many people mad has something to do with, yes, her relationship with Charlotte, but also how flippant not just she is about her housing, but an apartment that so many of us love, that I love. It's not just Carrie's apartment, it's our apartment. You know what I mean? And here she is being extra liberal with the jokes.
I'll be a bag lady, a Fendi bag lady, but a bag lady. I will literally be the old woman who lived in her shoes.
When some of us would have called Aiden up directly to schedule a payment plan. Ego, shoes, and a sense of independence that could leave you on the literal streets, all be damned. Anyway, she gets a wake-up call while apartment hunting by being informed that her rent-controlled place is a gem, and maybe it's this scene that puts a battery in her back to redouble her efforts. She goes to Big in what seems like Chanel, Upper East Side cosplay down. When they're all together, Carrie tells her friends that Big cut her a check for the down payment. When I was younger and foolish, I agreed with Miranda that you shouldn't take a man's money. And mostly, I agree with this for many women under most circumstances. But I really don't think Big thought anything of this. This is money he will not miss.
You're worth $1 million, Bradshaw.
He's also crucially the man Carrie cheated on Aiden with the first time they were together. This doesn't mean she should take the money, but also this is the absolute least that Big can do. Especially when we find out after he dies, he leaves a staggering $1 million to
Natasha?
His ex-wife.
You're worth $1 million, Bradshaw.
Carrie, in ripping up that check, tells me that she doesn't believe that because she couldn't even take less than that, but this isn't about Big and Carrie. Samantha, who can navigate the potential Bermuda Triangle of men giving her money because of her own financial independence and street smarts and social circle, says Carrie should just keep the money. Carrie cannot afford to move this way because she's financially more vulnerable and lacks Samantha's savvy. Charlotte expresses her discomfort with the conversation and is met with a frank rebuttal from Miranda, attorney at law, who shortly after offers Carrie the money after reiterating that she shouldn't take Big's money. This is an act of putting your money where your mouth is, if there's ever been one. Samantha, everyone's ride or die, offers to go half with Miranda, recognizing and protecting both of her friends at the same time, even though she would take Big's money. She, in a single gesture, prioritizes Miranda's value system, ensuring that Carrie has another option, and disperses a financial burden for herself. Charlotte does this. Remember, she's already expressed some reservations about the conversation, and she's listened to Carrie get 3 financial outs. Okay? Big, Miranda, and Samantha. Carrie declares that she will, quote,
I'm gonna do this on my own.
Whatever that means, while Charlotte takes another perfectly timed sip of her drink. Carrie rips up the check. The same check she could have ripped up in private or, not at all. Charlotte then promptly changes the subject. On their walk home, we find out that 2 whole weeks, 14 out of 30 days, have elapsed.
It's been a rough 2 weeks.
14 days to find a New York City apartment with no money while she lives in one, while several people have offered her money to keep it. This is something that I've noticed in other people and something that I've noticed in myself, but will generalize because I don't know you. When one can't confront something directly, when it hurts too much in that moment to articulate some truth about oneself to oneself, this is getting unwieldy. Just flow with me. It ends in an unhealthy expression of that fear. It could be spending money or isolation, or in Carrie's case, taking it out on Charlotte. And this is where I will try to explain through gritted teeth what annoys me most about this ambush. She knows she's wrong before she gets there. Fine. She walks into Charlotte's crib like it's hers. They're friends. Fine. But she goes a step too far for me in saying she wouldn't take the money. Spoiler alert, she does. Then she goes several steps further in saying she would offer Charlotte the money, but she couldn't. Period. This type of public-facing self-delusion makes me genuinely mad when it starts involving other people. It's wild that Carrie isn't saying this to some stranger. Charlotte knows that both of these things might not be true or are irrelevant because she knows Carrie. When Charlotte tries to explain some context, Carrie shuts it down immediately. Carrie is notorious for throwing people's mild criticism back in their faces.
Any little weakness or flaw, and you just write people off. My God, Miranda, you are so judgmental. Oh, what, you can say that I'm pathetic and needy and I can't say anything to you? No, I'm lying. For the last 5 months, I've been thinking that it is a huge mistake that you left Steve. There. How does it feel? Just because you're worried about your marriage, everyone's gonna cheat. Have a good time at dinner.
She doesn't just deflect, she punishes. She can't be forthright with information that might help her friends be better, but she expects unconditional support for her own mistakes. She either doesn't care enough about her friends to help them improve in real time, she doesn't actually care about those traits and issues because she's not really present enough to actually notice and remark on them in real time, or she's waiting to use that information and those observations at another date, as she does here.
So yes, I have made some mistakes, and Charlotte, you have made some mistakes.
Then the truth comes out.
And what kills me is you don't even have to work. You're volunteering.
This conversation lays bare just about all of the issues Carrie has with Charlotte in general, not just in this episode. Charlotte owns the apartment she has because she wanted it and got it in the settlement.
Oh, I paid for that apartment.
Trey didn't fight her on it, and she did try to keep them together. Charlotte is a true romantic and optimist and so badly wanted it to work. When it didn't, she felt entitled to that home, and she got it. And there's no problem with that. Here's the thing. Carrie was in a similar position with Big just a little bit earlier. Big gave her enough money to cover the down payment, and I'm going to say this, I believe he would have given her the money for all of it to purchase her apartment outright had she asked.
$1 million, Brad Shaw.
Would that have been too much? Maybe, but Carrie, by virtue of her standing in Charlotte's apartment, doesn't realize that she could have moved the same way, but chickened out. Carrie, by virtue of her standing in Charlotte's apartment, isn't actually against women getting some form of financial safety net. She's standing in Charlotte's apartment because that's what Charlotte did with Trey. She just doesn't want to have to shoulder the risk of that for herself in Big's relationship, even though Big had no problem giving her what might amount to him as basically chump change. For all that Carrie insists that Charlotte is so well off, she either doesn't recognize when she has similar opportunities or does and doesn't take them. She wanted Charlotte to pay for it, literally. I think Charlotte only says that Carrie believes she needs to stand on her own, not because she wouldn't help, but to buy herself some time, but she's no match. She's no match for her friend. Charlotte, wearing her ring in her home, has nothing to do with independence. Then Charlotte shares a bit of information that the reason she does not have a job isn't because she doesn't want a job, it's because she can't get hired, and that's why she took the position as docent. Carrie apologizes. It's as sincere as it can get for someone who prioritizes her male relationships over her friends, but still can't reap any tangible stabilizing benefits from them. The bar is apparently in Weehawken. Charlotte, in true romantic fashion, gives Carrie the ring to signify that her friendship is more important than the romantic relationship that she had with Trey, a thesis proposed at the beginning of the season that she honors.
Don't laugh at me, but maybe we could be each other's soulmates. And then we could let men be just these great, nice guys to have fun with.
Carrie gave her ring back, which I don't even know what words to use for it. It's not naive. It's false modesty, maybe?
Aiden wanted me to keep the ring.
You did, didn't you? Oh, honey, you're a fool.
No.
We don't know how much that ring was worth, and if she wasn't so dramatic or impulsive, she might have held onto it longer, not because she knew about the apartment, but because the ring was hers already.
I left the ring on the clown table.
That's yours.
No.
She wouldn't have had to ask Charlotte to pawn her ring if she'd kept hers. Maybe it wouldn't have been the same amount, but we need to stop acting like Aiden wasn't well off enough to have a fixer-upper upstate, his own home in the city, enough money to buy 2 apartments next to each other cash, if I recall correctly, a ring that made Carrie throw up, and then another one that she didn't even wear on her finger. And what was the actual issue with keeping the ring really? As a Bronx native once famously said, what was the reason? The ring may not have cost as much as Charlotte's, but also maybe it did. Just because Aiden wore flannel or wasn't as rich as Big doesn't mean he wasn't rich at all. Maybe she might have kept it if she had known about the apartment, if she had not waited 3 hours for that. The fact that that envelope is so thick is like, that's not a letter, girl, that's a book. That I'm not saying that she should have automatically known or whatever. It's just so like, okay. This is another thing. This is the oil and vinegar thing playing out again. Charlotte was able to learn from Carrie in a way that Carrie could not from Charlotte. There's a scene earlier in the episode where, after learning that Carrie gave back the down payment for her apartment, engagement ring, Charlotte goes to get rid of hers. She decides against it, but the gesture says to me she was listening to Carrie and took what she said seriously enough to just check it out. In the same conversation, Charlotte says she earned that apartment.
Oh, I paid for that apartment.
Instead of that sparking something in Carrie that might have led to her realizing that she too had paid dearly for the relationship with Big, she instead resents and stews and harbors venom for someone she could have been learning from. Charlotte eventually offers to give a ring that she got from Trey to give to Carrie, who ripped up a check from Big, the man she cheated on Aiden with around the time Charlotte was scheduled to be married to the very man who'd give her the ring that she would give to.
Oh, no, I can't. You love this
Charlotte
ring.
set aside all this knowledge to bail her friend out because the friendship was more important to her than the ring she loved. Carrie accepted that money to make Charlotte pay for everything Carrie couldn't or wouldn't be. We don't know if Carrie paid her back. I'd like to think that she did, and because it wasn't that big of a deal, wasn't mentioned again. It's just that the fact that she could have taken money from Big, the man she cheated with, adds another layer of hypocrisy to all of this. Instead of doing what might have been a bit easier, she leans on Charlotte, the one person who always supports her unconditionally. So when Carrie lashes out at Charlotte, when she makes her financial irresponsibility Charlotte's problem, it isn't just about money. It's about status and the resentment she can never say out loud because she benefits directly from Charlotte's wealth. I'm going to say this, okay? And I think some people will sort of understand what I mean. It makes it Charlotte's apartment too, which entrenches Carrie's subconscious idea that Charlotte is well off.
Oh, I paid for that apartment.
I don't think Charlotte thinks that, and I think Carrie knows it. Charlotte wouldn't budge into Carrie's apartment like Carrie did to her. Carrie solidifies and confirms Charlotte's identity even further, allowing her to continue to be resentful for having put her in such a position. It's cyclical, it's self-sabotaging, and it's self-perpetuating. Carrie, on the other hand, is handed an opportunity to secure stability and does so not through her own effort, but through Charlotte's generosity afforded by her and self-respect. Self-respect that Carrie doesn't have because she doesn't need it. She has Charlotte's. By using Charlotte's money, Carrie reinforces her role as a stable one and keeping Carrie caught in the cycle of making Charlotte pay for being Carrie's friend. I think it's neater and tidier that Carrie got the money from Charlotte at the last minute. I think Charlotte was not kind. She was acting as a friend. I think that is true what Charlotte said. If she has all of this money, some of it can be spent on her friends, and that's fine. That's good. I think, in fact, that is what is supposed to happen.
Carrie, this is a straightforward business proposal, clean and simple.
What this feels like is less to me like a friend loaning another friend money and one friend charging a toll for being her friend. I think if you have friends and you have money, just like Samantha said, if you have the money, you give it. If you need the money, you take it. The reason Samantha can say that is because she's operating as a businesswoman or a friend. During this moment where Charlotte proposes that they are each other's soulmate, Samantha's the only other one who's like, yes.
Well, that sounds like the plan.
But also, in that episode, Big is late for Carrie's, but this is going to be a very short recap. Big goes to Carrie after her birthday, where a bunch of people didn't show up because they were either in traffic or late, or they were late for her birthday. But they show up and they're there for her at the end of her birthday. Big shows up after midnight, that is to say, not on her birthday. Gives her balloons that he did not get out of the car for. When asked about soulmates, he has this to say.
I like the word soul. I like the word mate. Other than that, you got me.
And at the end, that is what Carrie says, oh, that's what Charlotte was talking about. Carrie, at the end of that episode, at least acknowledges what Charlotte was trying to get at all along. They are each other's soulmates. The series does not necessarily maintain this thesis throughout, or at least Carrie really doesn't live up to it for any number of reasons. But just to reiterate, I think that's sort of the point. We don't have to like Carrie for her to be a compelling character, and she is. We're willing to follow her through these storylines and through her relationships with all of these characters, partly because she's all over the place. If she wasn't, if she were perfect, or even a better friend, then it would be a different story. For the record, I don't think that Carrie is always or exclusively a bad friend. She just doesn't prioritize Charlotte in the same way that Charlotte does her. In that oil and vinegar homegirl dynamic, which I have since trademarked since the beginning of this video, that balance is in how each friend prioritizes each other.
In a real way. Maybe you're not really trying. Maybe you're not really out there.
Believe me, she's out there.
I think that Charlotte wants the best for Carrie in a way that Carrie might not always want the best for Charlotte. And I don't even think that this is the episode that best illustrates that. I think it's just the best cross-section of all of these other issues that come into play that make it the most obvious. With Charlotte especially, I do think that Carrie is not a great friend. I might even say an actively bad friend because her entitlement isn't just an expectation. It's born out of a sense of jealousy, which I think in friendship is actually very dangerous. And that jealousy is born out of the fact that she overly romanticizes her own life out of reality and resources. Like we discussed earlier, there were several times when Carrie was given an out. That I think that this is actually the best outcome for Carrie to get her apartment, which the episode closes with, doesn't change the friendship for the worse or for the better. All of the things that Carrie denied herself of, Charlotte took a risk on, and those risks are what allowed her to be able to help Carrie. And I think that's what Carrie senses and is actually resentful of. Carrie is supposed to be the savvy city girl.
I'm not a buyer. New York is a town of renters. Everybody rents.
I don't. I don't.
But the most risk-taking that she does is almost exclusively with her clothing. The best part of Carrie's relationship with Charlotte is loyalty. But again, I think that loyalty is conditional in a way that it's not for Charlotte. But Carrie gets to keep her apartment at the end of the episode, and in the next, she buys another pair of shoes. I can't say for sure exactly where she got the money from, but I hope they were worth it.